Okay, so today we're talking to Gemma Baker, Head of the Careers Service at Kaplan Law School. Thanks for talking to us, Gemma. Hello.
No worries. Hello.
And we're going to ask you a few of the tougher questions because we know that you're such a straight talker and have some sound advice. So, just starting off, what advice would you give to any candidate thinking of pursuing a career in law who has a 2-2 qualification?
I would say to them that they've really got to seriously consider the competitiveness of the career that they're going into. And when they're applying to firms, they've really got to look at those firms' minimum academic requirements, and the word minimum should be shouting out in their head. It's not the standard to which you must reach, it's their minimum. So possibly they're looking for better academics than they're considering, and generally most firms do say minimum 2-1. Every year there are students who do get a training contract with a 2-2. Generally they tend to perhaps have had more experience, previous careers, or have genuine mitigating circumstances. And by genuine I do mean significant instances in their life that have completely derailed their academics. And that really is important to bear in mind. They don't mean things like having the flu, tonsillitis, or a bit of a cold. I would say that if you're a recent graduate in the last couple of years, last 5 years, with a 2-2, you really do need to consider your options. What a lot of students do say to me are things like, well, I asked the firm and they said, oh, it should, we'd have to look at you. We don't just consider academics, but the 2-2 is a big deal. And really, you should be looking at having a consistent 2-1 through every single year of your degree, whether it counted towards a final classification or not. So my advice to be with people with 2-2 is perhaps to look at alternative careers or alternative routes like ILEX.
Okay. You mentioned genuine mitigating circumstances. If a candidate does have those, what do you think is the best way of making that clear to their potential recruiters?
I think they just need to make sure it's clearly defined on their application form. And I think what a lot of people are worried about is coming across as a bit of an X-Factor sob story, if you like, which isn't really what they're looking for. It's just really a clear statement of facts. Often, if something has happened to you or your family, it can be quite difficult to write about, so perhaps find a trusted friend or advisor who's able to put down the circumstances and how it affected you, or in far plainer terms. But it's very difficult for me to say without knowing the person and what happened. But I would say a clear statement of fact rather than an emotional backstory is what's needed.
Another tricky issue that a lot of people face is the tough decision about whether to take the LPC without having already secured a training contract. 'Cause obviously that's a bit of a financial risk,
Oh yeah.
considering the intense competition for training contracts. But obviously a lot of people do secure training contracts after having enrolled, so would you give any advice to those kind of people thinking about that?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one. Obviously I work at an LPC provider, and I feel fortunate to work at a provider that does have an academic requirement for admission, which is a 2-1 or above. Generally you should consider a few things. You should consider your academics. Have you got a 2-1, a good 2-1? Have you got good A levels? By that I mean ABB really, or maybe BBB as your minimum. I'm thinking about kind of the larger, the top 100 firms in the UK, if you like. This is what I'm thinking of. And you should also look at your extracurriculars. Have you got good solid extracurriculars, i.e. something that you've really committed to over a period of years, whether it's sport, drama, music, positions of responsibility, voluntary work. It doesn't matter, it's not necessarily law. You could have been football captain on your university squad for 3 years, which would have involved significant skill development in other areas other than just playing the sport. And you should really consider, am I the candidate that they want? And it's only then really that I think you should embark on the LPC. I think the other thing about doing the LPC is you've got to really commit yourself to getting a training contract during that year. And by that I mean really going hell for leather with applications. You've really got to attend all the open days and open evenings that you can. There are so many readily available to students between October and February each year at different firms, not necessarily having to go through any kind of lengthy application process, but certainly that are open to very many students. There are so many events, City Law Live, is a really good example of events for students to go to. We have a fantastic careers program here at Kaplan, and it takes up a significant amount of time. There's also things like pro bono that you can do at your LPC provider as well that will bulk up your CV. On top of that, of course, there's all the research, which takes ages, which should take ages, and also the application, writing the applications themselves. All these things really do add up, so you've got to think, oh, I'm going to dedicate myself to getting a training contract and really push yourself to all those activities I've just mentioned, as well as doing extremely well on the LPC, which generally means your social life takes a bit more of a back seat, but this is, getting a training contract is a life-changing opportunity. So if you are going to embark on the LPC, what I would say is really commit yourself to it. The other point is, if you are going to look for, if you have been applying so far and you've got good academics, good extracurriculars, and you are really what you think law firms need or want, then why haven't you got a training contract? It's likely you're doing something dreadful with your actual applications. So my advice here, and I speak from personal experiences, is take on board what people are saying to you, and especially any constructive criticism, and listen to those people. Because if you have your 2 A's and a B, you have your 2-1, and you've done great extracurriculars, and you're not getting through to interview, I can guarantee you there'll be something awfully wrong with your application. So seek out good quality, valid advice that will enable you to make the best possible presentation on paper to your desired firms.
Okay. Finally, you mentioned briefly the social aspects, the social impact of pursuing a career in law. Social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter are obviously so widely used now.
Yep.
And all kinds of compromising things can be posted on there. Should candidates really now be careful about what they post on social media? Because the law firm recruiters, do you think, maybe unofficially look at that?
I think officially, no, they don't. I think unofficially people do. And I think the real thing about Facebook in particular, is that a lot of people have their security settings on friends of friends. And all I can say is law is a tiny world. And one of my students this year said, my Facebook is on full lockdown, Gemma. There is no way you're going to be able to find anything incriminating whatsoever. Within about 3 minutes, I'd found 5 photos of him doing moonies at various different student parties. He was horrified, went fairly white, but it's because it was on a friend of a friend setting, and I knew somebody, you know. And the interconnectedness of the legal sector really comes into play here. What I would suggest is if you are able to apply your security settings really well, great, but make sure your profile photo is halfway decent. I've seen some shockers, and I don't necessarily mean it has to be, you know, a kind of partner photo in a suit looking dreadfully serious. It can be you mucking around, but generally I would say not in too much of a compromising situation. With regards to tweets, you are tweeting on a public forum. They can be your opinions. What I wouldn't use them to do is to vent anger at a particular person or something like that. You always want to look like a pretty decent individual who doesn't pose any risks to the firm should they employ you. There's nothing wrong with tweeting about more trivial things. I don't like films or TV or anything like that. Nothing wrong with that at all, but I'd watch the language in terms of swearing, perhaps, or looking a bit vindictive, which I have seen. I know this sounds a bit dramatic in the past 12 months. So just be aware that people can look at what you're writing yourself, and just always make sure that you'd be really proud to show, I'd say, your grandmother, your Facebook and your Twitter, or a senior partner. That's a pretty good rule of thumb.
I'd say so. That's a decent comparison, actually. Thanks. Well, thanks for talking to us, Gemma. Much appreciated.
That's okay, thank you.